a grabar aquí para subirlo después a YouTube también. Vamos a ver qué es lo que opina este corillo de IGN. Por lo que vi, le dieron un 6. Definitivamente, chico coronel. Estoy de sumo. Yo no hago más que meterme a jugar. Y el coronel ya está a level 37. Yo estoy apenas a level 14. A veces yo digo, lo tengo que coger con calma. Voy muy rápido. Y de momento pasa René. Mira que está jugando. Y yo, mira, estoy jugando World Wins. ¿Qué estás haciendo, René? ¿Qué level está? Y yo, gacho, René, por favor. Dime que está. Dime que no ha empezado. Diablo, chicos, ya estoy acabando el juego. Chicos, René, por favor. Por favor, necesitamos cogerlo con más calma. No todos estamos retirados. No todos podemos estar jugando tantas horas. Aunque yo quisiera de corazón estar súper retirado. Y estar jugando todo el tiempo que pueda. No, vamos a ver esto. Vamos a ver qué es la que hay. ¿Qué opinan nuestros amigos de IGN que le dieron un 6 a este juego? ¿Cómo? Brother, estoy bien mal y bien triste. ¿Estás triste? Bueno, espero que no estés pasando un mal momento, que puedas superarlo. El camino está lleno de muchos tropiezos y muchas tristezas. No les voy a mentir. Yo también tengo mis batallas. En fin. ¿Alguien le dio inverso? Era para ir paso inverso. Mara, dímelo inverso. ¿Alguien le dio un 6 a esto? Y yo jugué más de una hora. Es más, ¿dónde está el Steam? Déjame ver aquí, déjame abrirle el Steam. A ver cuánto hemos jugado de Werwin Smith. A usted no le va a aparecer ahí, pero... chico, ¿cómo que tú no te puedes conectar? Llevamos 8.5 horas. Casi 10 horas. En verdad no hemos jugado nada. Necesitamos jugar un poquito más. Nada, vamos a ver esto.
Where Winds Meet is an ambitious exercise in maximalism. Its sprawling world is a vibrant love letter filled with over-the-top characters who can practically fly through the
Cuéntame,
air, grand
porque estás
odes
bien
to the beauty
triste,
of the natural world,
ninja.
and the dark political sorcery that threatens all of that on a daily basis.
And we'll do it this way. Yeah, I see. Yes, good idea.
Combat is a steady, enjoyable ebb and flow that is full of style and substance, but at a slower pace than you might think from just watching it. The collage of the...
En verdad, eso el combate no es como lo dice. O sea, si lo pones en modo como lo estamos jugando casual, te va a dar los stop para los parry y todo. Pero si lo pones bien hardcore, literalmente no hay nada de esos stop. Tienes que tú meterle caliente.
The main saga and the innumerable side fables are a turbulent gust of ups and downs, both thematically and in quality. But unfortunately, the journey to experience it all is pocked by the steep cliffs of jarring late-game progression pacing and rocky valleys jagged with dizzying amounts of micromanagement that turns the very idea of interacting with its RPG systems into stone.
Cada vez que... Cada vez que estoy haciendo un streaming, TikTok tiene un problema conmigo. ¿Dónde era? Yo puse que esto era 18, aunque yo no he hablado malo, no he dicho ni una palabra mala todavía. Ni se me ha salido, ¿sabes? Ninguna palabrería, pero pues. Aparentemente y alegadamente, según TikTok, estoy violentando sus reglas. Vamos a ver esto. TikTok.
The fictional version of 10th century China Where Winds Meet is set in a politically broken place, where powerful clans fight to divvy up the region, both with open warfare and subterfuge. It's the perfect backdrop for you, an orphan raised by a working-class winemaker that's just itching to leave the humble life behind in search of adventure and purpose. The tale that sends you to lavish palaces, haunted caves, and dank dungeons is run-of-the-mill, with a handful of memorable moments that would be moving, but they are often undone by some pretty awful English localization that makes exchanges between characters dense with redundant sentences and turns of phrase that don't really make any sense.
All change daily and never a one missing.
It's also
Yo voy a ser bien honesto. Yo lo puse en inglés para no estar leyendo tantos subtítulos, pero dije, creo que es mejor, ¿sabes? Cambiarlo. Creo que lo voy a cambiar otra vez porque se escucha mucho mejor en el idioma original.
By weird technical issues like voice lines running over one another, subtitles not matching the words coming from characters' mouths, or voices going missing entirely.
Uncle Gong said he's bringing me a new storybook.
Can you wait for me just a little? I need to go inside and check something.
With some diversions into side quests and minigame dabbling, the main campaign's 2 chapters took me roughly 30 to 40 hours to complete. And while they each button up their own isolated stories well, it leaves the journey of your wanderer on a rather unsatisfying cliffhanger.
Come on, let's go!
The various side stories have the same uneven quality. On the whole, the best of them are better written and far more interesting than the main campaign. One story had me leading ghosts to the afterlife after the violent fall of their Buddhist commune.
Should father be home by now?
Another starts with me sneaking a nobleman out of his mansion because he doesn't want to commit to an arranged marriage. There's a spontaneity to these stories that you don't really see in RPGs like this, but they are also sullied with way more of the technical blemishes.
Yo hice un challenge que lo voy a subir. Era borracho. A ver quién encestaba mejor. Y yo, pero vamos a hacerlo, ¿me entiendes? Estos juegos siempre han sido así. En verdad, si tú vas a hacer un review de un juego como este, pero no te gusta tanto jugar, tú, en verdad no vas a... Va a ser una mierda para ti. Yo no les voy a mentir. Yo me metí un ratito... Y esta no es mi opinión, pero vamos a ir viendo esto.
Where Winds Meet is flashy and energetic. Each of the 7 weapons feels distinct and dangerous, and some have different styles to discover that change the patterns of your attacks, as well as the weapon skills you can unleash.
El combate está saro, en verdad.
You can equip 2 at a time, but I spent almost all of my playthrough as a tank, with a spear and a glaive that would buff each other when I use specific abilities.
Todavía yo no juego cooperativo, no juego online, no sé ni cómo se hace tan siquiera.
It's often a real pain in the ass to find alternatives worth using. All of the ability chaining and buff management makes Where Winds Meet feel much more like an MMO than an action game. It's faster paced than the genre might typically be known for, but this combat doesn't share any of the sensibilities of a Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry. There's no bouncing enemies or air juggles, nary an air combo or wall splat, just a lot of stun meter management and weaving attacks and abilities into specific sequence.
Te la pasaste solamente con un weapon jugando.
The tank was right at home to me as a lapsed MMO guy. Managing when to defend and when to go all out felt almost identical to a Dark Knight in Final Fantasy XIV, except with an active block, parry, and dodge. These tools do help break up the sort of autopilot syndrome of many MMO battles, especially the parry, which becomes so important that there is even an auto parry system you can toggle on and off that gives you regenerating resources called insight points to spend as get-out-of-jail-free cards when an incoming attack is about to land.
Yo no voy a mentir. Yo tengo el assist a los parries. Yo soy malísimo.
This was a great system for me to
Yo no voy a
play
mentir.
around
Yo
with
soy bien
early
malo.
on,
Yo soy bien malo.
and I still appreciate it as a clever way to blunt some of the difficulty spikes for people who need it. The MMO variety of your combat shine the most against groups of regular enemies. I'd still get to apply my beat-em-up flowchart of finding
Háblame del loot. Háblame del loot.
the group while navigating the threats of all the other lower-tier henchmen, but keeping my attack loop going and buffs topped off while doing so added an extra layer of tactics that really created a flow state I don't usually get from games like this. Of course, these enemies aren't very diverse, largely the same types of guys in different faction garb, with a special gang-specific unit.
Imagine being able to build anything.
Nosotros somos free to play, Corillo, como todos los demás.
44.
Va para allá.
To spice it up. Ironically, I think the flaws of this amalgam is most evident against bosses, where things really just get reduced down to a rinse-repeat cycle of parrying and dodging attacks, counterattacking, avoiding big telegraph blows, and so on. Most bosses are just super thugs with greater health and damage than the guys like them that you encountered in the field. The occasional big spectacle boss can shake things up, but even that tier of baddies is hit or miss. Chinese lion dancers in a full connected costume that hops on beams and shoots fireworks at you? Hit. A late Chapter 1 boss that seems to be attempting to recall Sekiro's Lady Butterfly fight from memory? Miss.
Vamos a ver.
The vast open world is overflowing with things to find and do when your adventure begins. Especially early on, I was pretty regularly surprised by some of the mostly silly things I stumbled across, like a bear practicing Tai Chi. But that's not simply there for a chuckle. You can actually spy on it and, through careful study, learn Tai Chi too. With it, I could then channel the power of the wind to yeet this very bear into some nearby rocks.
I finished. I need to get to General Shrine.
When time permitted, I always stepped aside to try to use my mystic arts to solve puzzles in the wild. Where Winds meets big problem, though, is that it's filled wall to wall with other activities that come nowhere close to this sort of ingenuity. There are some jobs you can pick up that make a good first impression, like a healing minigame that turns curing diseases or setting broken bones into a card battler. But that doesn't evolve much and doesn't really reward you meaningfully as you progress up the ranks. Most everything else are versions of the sorts of things you'll see in any open world RPG like this, none of which change the well-worn formula of these distractions.
A mí me gusta pescar, que chavienda.
In a way,
en estos juegos, yo soy de los que pescan. No voy a mentir, yo soy de los que pescan. Es más, ya yo quiero ver si hay una caña legendaria. Y la realidad es que yo no pesco en la vida real. Mi hermano pesca. A él le encanta pescar. Yo soy malo pescando. Pero en los juegos me encanta. Veo un laguito y es, diablo, vamos a buscar una caña, pa. Porque siento que puedo pescar algo aquí. Yo creo que eso.
Out more than a couple of times feel worth the trip. And that's despite the fact that they all dump a bunch of loot on you every time you succeed. Just about everything you do in this game does, but very little of what you're given is even worth opening your inventory to take a second look at. It's not that it's all worthless. Chances are it's going to include potions or food items that are going to be auto-used when necessary, or the various crafting and upgrade materials that will wait patiently deep in your pockets for when you occasionally need them. But my only relationship to any of this stuff is hoping I have enough of it when it's time to level up. Same with gear, which I just slot in whenever it's time to make my overall power level rise. Weapons, armor, and accessories all have little nuances to increase things like crit rate and damage.
Pues entonces, todo lo que grindeaste sirve para algo. Que si consigues un montón de cosas para después. No, lo uso después pues, para subir level. Pues ¿para qué es todo lo que te estaban dando? ¿Para qué exactamente era?
Damaged by small percentages, including set bonuses if you match pairs of items with similar set symbols. But this wall of text approach to equipment with tons of micromanagement is off-putting and not even very impactful until the endgame. I often just click the super handy quick advance button in the bottom corner that spends all of your resources to upgrade everything in a manner it deems fit, an option whose mere existence sort of makes a more damning argument against these overstuffed systems than I ever could. There are milestones that freeze your ability to continue leveling up at certain points until you pass what's called a breakthrough test, pitting you against waves of enemies that you must slay in a certain time frame in order to move on. These tests can eventually get tough, and passing raises your max level, but it then undermines that progress by also raising the collective strength of all of your enemies. Annoyingly, main story quests start to become level-gated as you approach the end, meaning you have no option but to grind experience in order to eventually pass these literal DPS checks. And even when you do, a breakthrough test might require you to wait real-life hours before you can move on to the next tier, as it did for me on 2 occasions, by gating my progress behind daily server updates, making me jump through a bunch of hoops to progress, only to tell me that I'm actually moving faster than intended, is ridiculous. Don't tell me how to waste my life.
Eso sí estoy de acuerdo, en verdad. Como que me pongas un tiempo para jugar y ya. Si hoy yo tengo 13 horas, pues déjame darle 13 horas hoy.
Craggy mountains and bustling towns of the Xionghu is a breezy experience thanks to your generous triple jump and wall running abilities, when they actually work, that is. During every play session at inexplicable intervals of time, these features will just inevitably stop working entirely, only to just be fixed when I log out and log back in. This doesn't make navigating all the mixed terrain a problem, but some hidden chests or activities that require these extra movement options are temporarily taken off the table for reasons that never feel good. Navigating lagging menus to sort out your gear, check the map, or level up your abilities can be a chore as well. Fumbling through sub-menus to click a tooltip so that I could read a further item description or find out where something was on the map was always a draining experience. The world of Where Winds Meet could have done with a couple dozen fewer of its random 5-minute mini quests if it meant spending more time making the process of flipping through all of these spreadsheets less painful. You can play a lot of Where Winds Meet co-op, but servers were pretty scarce pre-launch, and finding people to run multiplayer-focused events wasn't possible. I did at least get to take on the big raid-style bosses thanks to a full CPU party option. These automated party members were competent enough to do the assignments as required to minimize damage when necessary, but if they weren't basically immortal, I'm not sure they would have had the chops to kill any of these scary enemies. I'm sure my experience here is not representative of the design intention of these big co-op romps, but I'm still glad I could get access to the novel items they drop without having to find 5 of my own friends to do so.
Greetings. Look, we really don't have what you're...
Meredith.
Perhaps there's a version of Where Winds Meet that isn't throttled by the storm of its own lofty aspirations. It has a great understanding of what makes wuxia such a compelling subgenre of fantasy fiction, bleeding into a vibrancy of its characters and the flair of its combat. But it becomes clear very quickly that the attempt to shove as many kinds of experiences into one game, open world adventure, action-heavy MMO, musical rhythm game, card battler, etc., only ensures that none of these elements reach their full potential. Instead, Where Winds Meet is an amusement park where every ride is being run at half speed, and the sugary treats at the concession stands come with piles of paperwork to complete before you can chow down.
Un 6.
Treats at the
Un 6. Él dice que prácticamente es como un parque de diversiones y todos los rides están ahí a mitad de velocidad. Incompleto. Bueno, esa es la opinión del corillo de IGN. Nosotros bajamos el jueguito. En verdad, esto es un free to play. Me sorprende demasiado lo mucho que ofrece para ser free to play. Hoy en día, cada vez que sale un juego free to play, ya yo estoy mirando a ver qué hay en el market, cuáles son las microtransacciones y qué tipo de engaño hay. ¿Y por qué le pusieron free to play si no es free to play realmente? Esa es la realidad. Par de juegos hoy en día dicen free to play y no son free to play para nada. ¿Me entiendes? Si tú no metes un penny, no pasa absolutamente nada. Vamos a ver si esto realmente así, si vale la pena, si realmente se puede jugar free to play. Vamos a jugar el jueguito. Vamos a terminar de ver ya este videito. Si no estás viendo por YouTube, no olvides que nos puedes ir en donde Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, X3 para que vean todo lo que estamos haciendo, vacilen con nosotros y sean parte del journey. Los veo, corillo. Vamos a jugar ya este jueguito. Ya es hora de continuar. Tenemos 8.5 horas. Necesitamos subir esos números. Los veo.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.